Today, we are going to travel back to a time when kings ruled with iron crowns, when forests hid secrets, and when justice was not for everyone. It's a story that has lived for over 800 years, told around campfires, whispered in taverns, and sung by travelers. A story of courage, rebellion, and one man who dared to challenge the powerful. His name was Robin Hood, the outlaw who robbed from the rich and gave to the poor. But who was he really? A thief? A hero? A ghost born from the dreams of the suffering. Even after centuries, historians still argue, was Robin Hood a real person or just a symbol of hope? What we know for sure is that his story changed the idea of justice forever. He lived in England during a time when the poor were crushed under taxes and the rich danced on their pain. And from deep inside the Sherwood forest, a man with a bow and a brave heart rose to fight back. This is not just the story of an outlaw. It's the story of every person who ever stood up and said, "Enough, so sit back, listen closely, and feel the wind of medieval England, where one man's courage became a legend that still whispers, even today, stand for what's right, even if you stand alone." Chapter 1. The World Before Robin Hood Long. Before the name Robin Hood echoed through English forests, the land itself was heavy with unfairness. It was the 12th century, an age of castles and chains. Kings ruled with absolute power, nobles lived in stone towers, and common people bent their backs in muddy fields from sunrise to sunset. England was changing quickly. After the Norman conquest of 1066, French-speaking rulers controlled the country. They built new laws that often helped the rich and punished the poor. If a peasant, a poor farmer, killed a deer in the king's forest, it was a crime that could cost his life. Even the trees belonged to the crown. In forests were protected not for nature, but for the pleasure of royal hunting. In this world, justice was a luxury, something only the rich could afford. Courts listened more to gold than to truth. Taxes were heavy, and many families lost their small farms. People paid the church, the lord, and the king, yet still went hungry. Imagine living in a small wooden hut with no floor, only hard earth. The winter wind cuts through the walls. Your children cry for food, and outside, the sheriff's men ride through the village, collecting taxes you cannot pay. That was England before Robin Hood. A kingdom divided, the throne itself was often unstable. Kings like Henry II, Richard the Lionheart, and King John fought endless wars. Sometimes abroad, sometimes within their own family. Richard the Lionheart, reigned 1189–1199, spent most of his life fighting in the Crusades, religious wars in the Middle East. To pay for these wars, his brother John and local sheriffs squeezed the people dry with new taxes. When Richard was captured in 1192, England paid an enormous ransom, money paid to free someone, and ordinary people suffered again. This pain created anger that burned quietly in hearts across the country. Stories began to spread about someone, maybe a soldier, maybe a nobleman gone rogue, who fought back for the poor. The birth of a legend. Many historians believe the idea of Robin Hood began around this time. Some early ballads, folk songs, mention a man living in the greenwood, the deep forests of Nottinghamshire and Yorkshire, who helped the weak and punished greedy officials. 1. If the earliest written mentions of the name Robin Hood appears in the 1300s in court records and poems, but by then the story was already ancient in people's mouths. You see, dear listener, legends are born not from one man, but from a nation's need for hope. When life becomes too heavy, people invent heroes who can carry the weight for them. Robin Hood became that hero, the dream of justice, walking with a bow. Sherwood Forest, a refuge and a symbol at the centre of the legend stands Sherwood Forest, near the town of Nottingham. In the Middle Ages, this forest was enormous, more than 100,000 acres, 40,000 hectares of oak, birch, and pine. It was a world apart from the cities, a green sea where laws of men faded and freedom breathed again. To the poor, Sherwood was a hiding place. To the rich, it was a nest of criminals. To storytellers, it was sacred ground, where the line between good and bad blurred, and where outlaws could become heroes. Here, the Sheriff of Nottingham, the king's local enforcer, became the symbol of corruption, using power unfairly. He collected high taxes, seized land, and punished anyone who dared to resist. And so, in stories, he became the perfect enemy for Robin Hood, the cruel face of authority. Why Robin Hood mattered to understand why Robin Hood's story grew so powerful, we must see what people lacked. They had no voice, no freedom, and no fairness. The poor could not defend themselves in royal courts, because trials cost money. A noble's word outweighed a peasant's truth, so imagine hearing about a man who stood up to the sheriff, who tricked greedy monks, who gave food to hungry families, all while laughing under the green leaves. For people who had nothing, that story was everything. Robin Hood became the invisible revenge of the powerless. He was what they wished they could be, fearless, clever, free, and his followers, Little John, Friar Tuck, Maid Marian, and the Merry Men, made the dream feel real. They lived together in friendship and equality, sharing everything they had. In an age of strict classes, their forest life sounded like heaven, between history and hope. Was Robin Hood a real man? Some say he was Robert Horde or Robin of Locksley, a rebel soldier who fought against King John around 1200. Others believe he was never one person, but a mixture of many local heroes, every man who ever stole from a cruel lord or protected a neighbor. But the truth is, it doesn't matter. What matters is what he meant, and what he still means today. In that cruel world before him, justice belonged to the powerful. After his legend spread, justice began to belong to everyone's imagination. That is why people kept his name alive, not through history books, but through hearts. So when you hear Robin Hood, remember, he was not just a man in green clothes hiding among the trees. He was England's first folk hero, born from hunger, shaped by injustice, and carried forward by hope. And in the next chapter, we will step deeper into that forest, where arrows fly, laughter echoes, and a legend takes form. Chapter 2. The Forest Awakens. Sherwood Forest was more than just trees and shadows. It was a home, a fortress, and a secret world where Robin Hood and his band of outlaws lived. Here, the poor could find help, and the corrupt officials of Nottingham had no power. Robin moved quietly through the forest, his green tunic blending with the leaves. In his hand, he carried his longbow, a weapon he had trained with since he was young. He was not just an outlaw. He was a protector of the people who had been ignored by the rulers. By the river, he met Little John, his tall and strong companion. John carried his heavy staff with ease and always had a sharp mind for planning. "Robin," John said, "the sheriff's men are searching every road. They are angry because the poor are getting help again." Robin nodded. "Good, let them be angry. Our fight is not against them personally, but against their greed and cruelty." Soon, Maid Marian arrived. She was brave, smart, and had chosen to stand with Robin, leaving her noble life behind. "Robin, we must be careful," Marian warned. "The sheriff has posted guards along the main roads. Anyone helping us could be punished." Robin smiled. "Then we need to move faster than their guards can stop us." The merry men gathered, Will Scarlet, quick and clever, Friar Tuck, strong and loyal, and Much the miller's son, young but brave. Together, they were more than friends. They were a family. That morning a messenger arrived with news. A cart carrying gold and food for the poor was travelling to a distant village. Robin knew this was their chance to help many people who were suffering. As the sun rose, Robin and his men hid behind thick bushes near the road. They watched carefully. Soon they saw the cart, guarded by 2 armed men. Robin whispered instructions. "Will, you distract the guards. John, help with the cart. Marion, watch the road." "We cannot fail." Will ran forward, laughing and teasing the guards. They looked confused, trying to figure out who he was. Meanwhile, Robin and Little John moved quickly, lifting the sacks of gold and food. Marion kept an eye on the road, ready to warn them if anyone approached. The operation was successful. The poor families in the village received food and gold. Children laughed, mothers cried with relief, and the villagers whispered Robin Hood's name with respect. "Robin Hood is not just a man," one villager said quietly. "He is hope." But the Sheriff of Nottingham was angry. He heard reports of missing gold and growing support for the outlaw in Sherwood Forest. He swore to capture Robin Hood, but the forest was full of tricks, hidden paths, and clever minds. Every time the sheriff tried, he failed. Robin's life was not easy. He had to hide constantly, move silently, and plan carefully. But every risk he took was for the people. He believed that justice and fairness were more important than safety. Even among the merry men, there were lessons of loyalty and trust. Robin taught them, "We are not thieves for ourselves. We fight for the poor. We give them what they deserve." And slowly, the legend of Robin Hood grew. Children whispered his name while playing in fields. Farmers told their families how he had helped them. Even the greedy nobles began to fear a man who could take their wealth and give it to the helpless. In Sherwood, life was both dangerous and alive. Robin and his men faced many challenges, traps, armed soldiers, and harsh winters. But they were never alone. The forest, with its thick trees and secret paths, gave them strength. Every bird that sang, every stream that ran, reminded them that freedom was worth fighting for. By the end of this chapter, one thing was clear. Robin Hood was not just surviving in Sherwood. He was creating a world where courage, loyalty, and justice mattered more than gold or power. And the people began to believe that even in a world ruled by cruel rulers, one man and his friends could change the lives of many. Chapter 3. Robin Hood and the Sheriff's Challenge. The Sheriff of Nottingham was furious. His gold had been stolen again, and the people were talking more about Robin Hood than about him. The guards whispered about the outlaw in fear, and even the nobles began to worry. "We cannot let him continue," the sheriff said, slamming his fist on the table. "Find him! Capture him! Bring him to me!" But Robin Hood was not easy to catch. He knew every path, every hidden stream, and every tree in Sherwood Forest. He could disappear in seconds, leaving only his shadow behind. That morning, Robin and the merry men were planning their next action. They sat in their hidden camp, near the edge of a thick grove. "The sheriff will send more guards this time," said Little John, his voice serious. "We must be ready." "Yes," Robin replied. "But we do not fight for ourselves. We fight for the poor. They are counting on us." Maid Marian brought news from the village. Some families were starving because of heavy taxes. Robin's eyes narrowed. Every plan, every risk, every arrow, every stolen coin was for them. "We will strike again," he said. "We will take from the greedy and give to those who need it most. But we must be clever." Robin divided the merry men into groups. Some would distract the guards, some would protect the villagers, and others would hide in trees to watch for danger. Robin himself would lead the attack. That afternoon, they saw the sheriff's men approaching. Guards rode on horseback, wearing armor that shined in the sun. But Robin was ready. He had prepared a trap, a plan to catch or surprise someone using the forest. "Hide behind the trees," he whispered. "When they pass, we will act." The sheriff's men entered the forest, unaware that Robin and his band were watching from above and around them. Then with a swift move, Robin and his men blocked the path. They shouted and threw nets, confusing the soldiers. Will Scarlet and Little John quickly took the gold the guards were carrying and handed it to Marion. She ran through the forest, leaving the men behind, to distribute it to the starving villagers. "Quickly!" Robin shouted. "Every second counts." By nightfall, the sheriff had failed again. His men returned empty-handed, and the villagers celebrated in secret. Stories of Robin Hood's bravery spread faster than wildfire. But Robin knew their fight was not over. Every time they succeeded, the sheriff grew stronger and more determined. He sent more men, built traps, and even tried to lure Robin out with lies and promises of safety. "We must stay united," Robin said to the merry men. "Our strength is in our friendship, in our courage, and in our mission to help those who cannot help themselves." Even though life in Sherwood Forest was dangerous, Robin Hood and his friends never gave up. They trained every day with bow, sword, and staff. They learned the forest paths, practiced their plans, and prepared for the sheriff's next move. At the same time, Robin and Marion grew closer. She admired his courage, and he admired her wisdom. Together, they inspired the merry men, giving hope to the villagers and striking fear into the hearts of the greedy nobles. "We do not fight for gold or glory," Robin told them once. "We fight for justice. That is our true reward." And so, the legend of Robin Hood grew. The sheriff's challenges became bigger, the risks became higher, but the outlaw's heart remained fearless. Every stolen coin, every rescued villager, and every clever trick strengthened the story of a man who stood for the weak, even against kings and armies. By the end of this chapter, the forest itself seemed alive with Robin Hood's courage. Birds flew freely, streams ran swiftly, and even the trees whispered his name. The people knew that as long as Robin lived, Sherwood Forest was a place where justice, kindness, and hope could survive, even in the darkest times. Chapter 4. Robin Hood's Greatest Robbery. The sun had barely risen when Robin Hood gathered his merry men. Today they faced their biggest challenge yet. A royal treasury, carrying gold meant for King John, would pass through the forest. If they succeeded, the poor would be fed for months. If they failed, the sheriff would capture them all. "This is dangerous," Robin said, looking at his friends. "But we cannot ignore it. People are starving. We must act," Little John grinned. "Then let's make it count. We've never failed when we work together." Maid Marian carried the news from nearby villages. "The sheriff's men are expecting trouble," she warned. "They've doubled the guards, and the road is heavily watched." Robin nodded. "That is why we must be clever. Speed, skill, and courage. That is our plan." Preparing the plan, the merry men split into groups. Some would create distractions, others would hide the treasure, and Robin himself would lead the main attack. Every member knew their role perfectly. The forest became alive with whispers and secret movements. Birds flew as if sensing the tension. Streams sparkled under the sun, reflecting arrows ready to fly. Robin moved silently, checking paths and watching the guards. "Remember," he said, "no one gets hurt if it can be avoided. Our fight is for the people, not revenge." Will Scarlet prepared the nets. Little John sharpened his staff. Friar Tuck prayed silently, asking for courage. Marian kept an eye on the road, her heart beating fast. The treasury arrives by midday. The royal treasury came into view. A large cart full of gold coins, guarded by armed soldiers. They rode slowly, unaware that the forest was ready for them. Robin signaled, "Now!" Will Scarlet jumped from behind a bush, shouting and throwing sticks to confuse the guards. Little John blocked the path with his strong staff, forcing the soldiers to stop. The merry men moved quickly, lifting gold sacks from the cart and hiding them in secret spots. Maid Marian ran through the trees, delivering gold to waiting villagers who hid nearby. Children laughed and mothers wept quietly with relief as they received the food and coins. "Robin Hood is alive," a villager whispered. "He protects the poor." The sheriff's men tried to fight back, but Robin's plan was perfect. Every guard who approached was delayed by traps and clever tricks. The forest itself seemed to fight for Robin, hiding him and his friends from danger. The sheriff's anger when the sheriff finally learned of the robbery, he was furious. Impossible. He shouted, "No one can outsmart me." But Robin Hood had already disappeared into Sherwood. Every path he took was known only to him and the merry men. By nightfall, the villagers had received the gold and food, and the sheriff's men returned empty-handed. The robbery became the greatest feat of Robin Hood's life. Stories spread quickly, travellers, merchants, and villagers told the tale of the brave outlaw who had stolen from the king's guards and given to the poor. The lesson of the robbery, Robin Hood never took more than needed. Every coin was shared. Every action had a purpose: to protect the helpless, to punish greed, and to teach the rich that cruelty would not go unchallenged. "A hero," Little John said quietly, "is not someone who fights for himself, but someone who fights for others." Robin smiled. "Exactly. That is why we do this. That is why Sherwood must remain free." The growing legend, from that day on, Robin Hood's name became a symbol, not just for stealing gold, but for justice, courage, and hope. The poor began to whisper his name before meals. Children told stories of the green-clad hero. Even some knights secretly admired him for standing up to King John's unfair rule. The forest itself became a character in the story, a place where the powerless could feel strong, where bravery mattered more than wealth, and where friendship and loyalty could overcome fear. Robin knew that their fight would never truly end. The sheriff would continue to chase him, but Robin Hood also knew that as long as they remained clever, brave, and united, they would always protect the people. By the end of this chapter, one fact was clear: Robin Hood was no longer just an outlaw. He had become a legend, a hero who showed that even in a world ruled by cruelty and greed, justice could exist, if one had courage, loyalty, and heart. Chapter 5. Robin Hood and the final confrontation Sherwood Forest had never been quieter. The birds were still, the leaves barely moved, and even the streams seemed to flow slower. Robin Hood knew this silence was not peaceful. It was a warning. The Sheriff of Nottingham had gathered his largest force yet, determined to capture the outlaw once and for all. "They will come in numbers we have never seen," Little John said, his staff in hand. "We must be ready for anything," Robin nodded. "We are ready, John. Today, it is not just about stealing gold. It is about protecting Sherwood and the people who believe in us." Maid Marian stood beside Robin, her eyes full of courage. "Robin, I am with you. Whatever happens, we will face it together." The merry men gathered around a large oak tree, their faces determined. Will Scarlet checked his daggers. Friar Tuck prayed silently, and Much the miller's son clutched his small sword tightly. Each of them knew that today's battle would decide the future of Sherwood. The sheriff strikes by, mid-morning. The sheriff's men appeared on the forest road. Horses stomped loudly, armor clinked, and banners waved in the wind. The sheriff rode at the front, his face red with anger. Robin signaled to his men. "Remember, every move counts. Protect the people first, then the forest." We cannot fail. The battle began. Arrows flew from the trees, knocking shields and helmets aside. Nets trapped some of the guards, while the merry men, used their clever knowledge of the forest to disappear and reappear, confusing the sheriff's soldiers. "Robin Hood!" the sheriff shouted. "Come out, coward, face me!" Robin laughed softly. "Coward? No, Sheriff. You are the coward. You hide behind your men while we fight for what is right." Clever traps and strategy. Robin had prepared traps long before the battle. Hidden pits covered with leaves, ropes that pulled soldiers into mud, and false paths that led nowhere. Every part of Sherwood worked in his favor. The merry men guided the sheriff's men into these traps, while saving any villagers who were caught in the chaos. Little John and Will Scarlet worked together, taking the gold that the sheriff had brought as a bribe for loyalty, and handing it secretly to Marion, who delivered it to the needy. "Robin Hood is unstoppable," whispered a guard, dusting himself off from a trap. "No one can catch him in this forest." Robin faces the sheriff. Finally, Robin and the sheriff came face to face. The sheriff's sword was sharp, but Robin's skill with the bow and his intelligence made him a dangerous opponent. They circled each other, tension rising. "This ends today, Robin Hood," the sheriff growled. "No," Robin replied firmly. "It ends when justice is done for the people. You cannot stop what is right." They fought carefully, neither willing to give up. Robin used his knowledge of the forest, dodging behind trees, leaping over roots, and striking when the sheriff's sword slowed. The battle lasted until sunset. By then, the sheriff's men were exhausted, the forest still, and Robin stood tall. He had protected the gold, the villagers, and the freedom of Sherwood, victory and hope. The villagers came out cautiously from hiding. They cheered, crying with joy as Robin distributed the stolen gold and food. "Robin Hood has won again," they shouted. Robin turned to his merry men. "Today we showed that courage, friendship, and justice are stronger than fear and greed. Never forget, every small action matters. Every person can make a difference." Even the sheriff, humiliated but alive, returned to Nottingham. Though he continued to hate Robin Hood, he could not erase the lessons of Sherwood, that the people had a hero, and that greed and cruelty could be defeated with courage and heart. The lesson of Sherwood Robin Hood's legend grew even stronger. The poor remembered him not as a thief but as a protector. The rich feared him, not because he was violent, but because he stood up for what was right. Sherwood Forest became a symbol, a place where the weak could hope, the oppressed could dream, and the brave could fight without fear. Robin Hood and his merry men showed that justice and kindness could outsmart cruelty, and that even one person could make a difference. By the end of this chapter, one thing was clear: Robin Hood was more than an outlaw. He was a legend, a hero who had taught the world that courage, cleverness, and heart mattered more than gold, power, or fear. Chapter 6. The Outlaw's Clever Tricks. After the great battle with the sheriff, life in Sherwood Forest seemed calmer. But Robin Hood knew danger was never far away. The sheriff was angry, the nobles were greedy, and new challenges awaited. Robin and his merry men had to remain clever, brave, and united. Robin often used trickery to outsmart his enemies. One famous plan involved a large banquet organized by the sheriff. The sheriff wanted to lure Robin into a trap using food and wine as bait. But Robin was clever. He disguised himself as a common traveler, carrying a small bag of coins. He entered the banquet quietly, observing every detail. "Do not touch anything yet," he whispered to Little John. "We need to know who is loyal and who is greedy." Robin noticed the guards looking suspiciously at everyone, trying to find him. Using quick thinking, he swapped the sheriff's gold coins with stones while no one was watching. By the time the sheriff discovered the trick, Robin had disappeared into the forest, leaving the guards angry and confused. Another famous story tells of Robin rescuing villagers from unfair taxes, A wealthy noble demanded extra money from poor farmers. Robin and his merry men disguised themselves as tax collectors. They entered the noble's estate, collected the money, and returned it to the villagers, hiding their faces behind hoods. "We do not fight for ourselves," Robin said to Marion. "We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves." Even though Robin Hood's actions were dangerous, the villagers loved him. Children played games pretending to be him, singing songs about his bravery. Mothers told their children to be kind and brave, inspired by Robin's courage. Life in Sherwood was not always about fighting. Robin and his men trained every day, planned for the next challenge, and shared stories of hope and justice. Each day they grew closer as a family. The forest was their home, a place where friendship, loyalty, and cleverness kept them safe. Robin Hood knew that his mission was not just to steal gold. Every act was a lesson. Courage could defeat fear, cleverness could outsmart cruelty, and even a small group of brave people could change the lives of many. Chapter 7. The final years and Robin Hood's death years passed in Sherwood Forest. Robin Hood was no longer the young man who first entered the woods with a bow and arrow. Time had made him wiser, but his heart remained brave and strong. He continued to fight for the poor, outsmart the sheriff, and protect the people of Nottingham. "Every day counts," Robin said to Little John. "We must use our strength and courage to help as many as we can." Even as Robin aged, his legend grew. Stories of his bravery spread across England. Children sang songs of the green-clad outlaw, villagers whispered his name before meals, and even some nobles secretly admired him for his sense of justice. Robin's wisdom and leadership, Robin Hood's later years were quieter but filled with lessons. He trained the younger merry men, teaching them archery, clever tricks, and how to stay loyal to one another. "Do not just fight," Robin advised. "Think, plan, protect. Every action has a reason. Every life matters." Maid Marian stood beside him through all these years. Together, they inspired courage and hope. She reminded Robin that their mission was never just about gold or stealing. It was about helping the helpless and standing against cruelty. A hidden betrayal. Even in Sherwood, danger was never far away. Some say that in his final years, Robin Hood was betrayed by someone he trusted. Stories vary, but one version tells of a man who offered Robin medicine for his illness, claiming it would heal him. Unfortunately, it was a trap. Robin fell seriously, ill, and realized that he could no longer lead the merry men in dangerous adventures. "Do not worry," Robin told his friends. "The forest is in good hands. Continue our mission. Protect the poor. Remember what we stand for." The merry men were heartbroken. They had grown up with Robin, fought beside him, and seen him outsmart countless enemies. But Robin's wisdom had prepared them. They knew the forest, the people, and the values he had taught them. Robin Hood's death Robin Hood passed away quietly, surrounded by the people he had protected. Some say he died in Sherwood Forest, lying beneath the trees he loved so much. Others believe he went into hiding to live his last days in peace, far from the sheriff's reach. But whether in the forest or in secret, his legend never died. Stories of Robin Hood continued to inspire people. He became a symbol of courage, justice, and hope, a man who dared to stand for the weak and challenge the powerful. "A Robin Hood is not just a man," Little John said, tears in his eyes. "He is a lesson. He is hope for everyone who cannot fight for themselves. The lasting legacy. Even centuries later, Robin Hood's name lives on. Masks, books, plays, and movies celebrate his adventures. His story reminds people that one person, with courage and heart, can make a difference. The forest may be quiet, but the spirit of Robin Hood remains alive wherever injustice exists. Villagers, storytellers, and learners across generations continue to teach his lessons, help the poor, fight cruelty, protect the weak, and always stand for justice. Robin Hood may have left Sherwood Forest, but the legend he created is eternal. Every arrow fired in his name, every story told by children, and every act of courage inspired by him is a part of his immortal legacy. Robin Hood's story teaches us more than just history. It teaches values, courage, and clever thinking, and shows how one person can make a difference. Even as English learners, reading or listening to his story can help. Learn new words and phrases like outlaw, mission, trap, bravery, and loyalty.